Hi, everybody. My name is Kai Devereaux Lawson, and I'm the co-host and co-producer of Mixed Company Podcast. And I am here in partnership with the Advertising Club of New York as we present to you the 2019 Black History Month campaign entitled Icons, Rock Stars, and Innovators. And I am here with somebody that I've been dying to speak with for, I guess, how long have we been doing the podcast? About 3 years? Yes, 3 years. I'm here with Sheldon Levy. Sir, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm super excited to talk to you today.
And I'm humbled to be here.
Being humbled to be around me, that makes me laugh a little bit because, like, anybody that knows me from back in the day, they'll be like, Kai, and I'll be like, yeah, he was excited to talk to me. So we're here for a full conversation about your career. We're going to talk a little bit about the golden age of advertising, which we're earmarking from the 1960s to the early 90s. And I'm just going to assume you know a little bit about that.
A bit.
A bit?
Yeah, just a bit.
Well, anything you know would be great to hear from you. So let's start off by getting an idea of what your career has been like as a man of color in advertising.
Well, I'd have to say that, first of all, I think I started in the sunset of the Mad Men era, when if you had a mouthful of chiclets, a low golf score, and knew your way around a martini, you had a career.
I got 2 out of 3, so this is fine. I can do it.
And you were Caucasian male.
Oh, well, can't win them all.
So, my impressions were it was the sunset of that era, but all of those characters were still around and reigning. But I was a member of the inaugural class of MAPE, the Multicultural Advertising Internship Program.
That's the inaugural class means the first class. So that's like
1973.
Woo, okay.
1973, and there were 20 of us.
Wow.
And they all got jobs. I mean, they are all the best doctors, lawyers, and morticians all over the country. But I was the only person who got addicted to advertising.
You kept the bug, okay.
Yeah. And I'm proud to say that 45 years later, last August we pinned 219 graduates.
Wow.
So, but that sort of was the imprimatur of my career in advertising. I had a career in radio before that. I was precocious. I started at the age of 17.
Oh man.
But
a little ambitious, huh?
A little bit. But MAPE for me was not just a gateway, but it was a branding experience. What it did was I got a leg up because it sort of branded me in a way that just always distinguished me from the rest of the crowd. Black, brown, blue, green, or purple.
Got it.
Because they said, this kid's been through this crucible. We don't exactly know what it is, but he knows a little something, something.
Got it. So you were a part of the first class of MAPers. So tell me about your career after that. What was your next step?
My next step was finishing school, and after that, I went back to radio. I worked in talk radio as a producer and a salesman for another 2 years. And then serendipitously, I got a call from Compton Advertising. And I got hired in a position that they didn't have. They didn't have assistant producers, and I was the first one. And I worked there for 2 years. And I worked on, I think, 9 P&G brands, and I actually commuted for 2 years between New York, Toronto, and Montreal.
Ooh, that's not like, that's no Brooklyn to Manhattan.
No, but it was interesting because it was that classic P&G production training program of the 70s, where it was all disciplined, and it was all, make sure that all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed. It was great, and I had a really good mentor there at the time. And then the life-changing experience for me was that I got a casual introduction to a man who changed my life, named late Jim DeBarros.
Those are the best casual introductions to have.
Who had just been promoted to vice president at Doyle Dane Bernbach.
Okay.
It was a big deal back then. And he decided that he wanted to hire me, though I didn't have work on my reel that was up to quote-unquote DDB's standards. And I get a little choked up every time I talk about it because he had to risk his career to hire me because people didn't get it. And I will recall, I'll paraphrase, he said, the guy's got the goods, he's educated, he's smarter than all you guys in the room, so I'm going to hire him. And those, I guess, 8 years were probably the most developmental, the most energetic. It was a tremendous place to work. Not without its flaws, not without its prejudices, but working at DDB at that time on VW and all that other stuff was just amazing.
It's amazing you actually speak about that because I can call to quite a few shows that we've recorded on Mixed Company where, you know, we've discussed the people that put their careers on the line to hire us and why we've become so passionate. So it's amazing to hear that even before our careers were even decided upon, that there have been people consistently within this industry that were willing to bet on your smarts and hope for the best for everybody. So it's amazing.
Yeah, changed the entire course of my life.
So even with that being said, so we are discussing what we're calling the golden age of Black advertising. What would you say, would you be able to say that you think we might be in a moment like that today, being that during the 60s through the early 90s, there was an era of collective empowerment and consciousness that people were starting to feel comfortable being themselves and moving away from identifying with the status quo, mainstream, assimilation. It feels like that today, but I wonder, do you agree?
Well, I think it may be that way simply because our business is more than evolving. It's kind of convulsing.
Okay.
And I think now that there is such a wave of recreation. I mean, every 3 weeks, it looked like there's a different roadmap to success for agencies and agency professionals. So I think there is some growth room simply because we are in this tumultuous time where all of the rules don't count anymore.
They sure don't.
You know, and so I think that within that, it's necessary that companies and individuals innovate.
Speaking of innovation, you know, we're celebrating Black history as it pertains to the advertising business. I'm wondering if you have a specific innovation or a specific moment within this golden era or this golden age of Black advertising that you think we should celebrate this month.
Well, you know, my experience, my observation is, if you want to talk about the eternal impact that I think those companies had, it was twofold. I think it was truth. That the reason why they succeeded and needed to be because they brought a real truth about people of color and African Americans in particular into their depiction in print and radio and television. So I think that was one thing. I think the other thing was, I don't think that this industry ever did anything with music the way that they do now because of the innovations and trails that agencies like Burrell and Uniworld did with not merely propping up artists of color, but building stories around them and actually producing tracks with them. And I think that's something that those agencies took the lead on. I think that's an everlasting effect.
I would also agree with that. I mean, most of the commercials that I can remember are jingles from the radio growing up. Like, I knew them as if they were songs from the radio. Sure. You could put that on a whole mixtape and I'd sing along with it. So 100% agree with that. Speaking of Uniworld and Burrell as agencies, there have been quite a number of Black-owned and led agencies throughout the duration of this golden age of Black advertising. Why do you think some of these agencies, specifically Burrell and Uniworld, have been able to sustain themselves so long in the current culture of advertising?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the founders of those agencies were grounded, they were ad people. They were ad people. They had come through the crucible of general market, unfriendly waters, and they had the goods. So I think that they had a tremendous discipline and an insight that was armor during the tough times. You know, I think one of the things that always bothered me about the way that professionals of color in our business were perceived, and particularly the work that the quote-unquote special markets agency did was that it was like neighborhood youth corps filmmaking. You know, that somehow or other this was remedial advertising, simply because people of color were behind it. And that, while it was not true, it was grounded in a sociological conceit and prejudice that had so much to do with the fact that if you're in charge and you write the cultural standards,
That's right.
that it must be so. So anyway, that's my take on it.
Definitely. You've actually mentioned a couple times having the goods. What would you say what makes up the goods? What does it mean to actually have the goods in this industry?
Well, you know, first of all, today, I think it's a work ethic. It's skin that's not too thin and skin that's not too thick. And it's talent. And it's passion. I think, particularly today, when we're on such shifting sands, one has to be passionate about what you do. So for me, I think those are sort of the most salient qualities.
Okay. So I have one last question for you, because you have just such an amazing story, and I mean, it's Black History Month. In your career, can you recall any memories that you've experienced that you can say, you know what, that right there is Black history? Well,
I can think of two that I wasn't directly involved in, but I have to think that there's a little publicized watershed moment when Burger King, which, as we all know, has shopped around a bit, was looking for a campaign, and they just their agencies, quote unquote, couldn't get it, and Uniworld had the campaign, and so for a very long time, Uniworld was running the campaign for and I think that's a little recognized a moment. Another thing I think goes back to something they observed with Burrell. Coca-Cola had a product called Sprite, which they could not get a handle on what to do. And Tom Burrell and his team got involved and made that brand not just viable, but made it sail. And I think any time that they differed from that course, Burrell's probably had to come in with the fire engine, put out the fire. So those are two things that I observed. I would have to say that if there was a Black history moment, I would think that it would be, I think the founding of Ad Color is a watershed, a landmark, and a business-changing innovation.
Amazing.
So big ups to Tiffany Warren.
And also big ups to you. Like, you get a major shout out sitting here with you to hear your story and get your insight on, you know, time before I even started my career in this business is amazing. So thank you for sitting with me. Thank you all for joining in and listening to our conversation. And we'll be speaking, I'm sure.
I hope so.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.